Peekskill, New York, September 4, 1949, 1:47 p.m., the caravan entered the town like an invading army that made no effort to hide its purpose, 23 cars moving in tight formation with no gaps and no hesitation, engines humming low as they rolled toward Cortlandt Manor where Paul Robeson was scheduled to perform at 3 p.m., each vehicle carrying 4 to 5 men. Black men from Harlem in dark suits, white shirts, tightly knotted ties, faces hard, windows rolled down not for air but for visibility, because this was not a group trying to blend in. This was a message meant for everyone lining the road to see and understand, and at the front sat Ellsworth, Bumpy Johnson, 44 years old, Harlem's most powerful and respected black criminal operator, a man who survived not through recklessness but strategy, who understood that real power was control, a name that carried weight in Italian mob boardrooms and fear in anyone foolish enough to threaten Harlem's people, because this was not impulsive muscle but a calculated operation, and the white supremacist mob lining both sides of the road understood that instantly, having spent the morning throwing rocks at black families, screaming slurs, chasing men, women, and children with bats while police looked away, enjoying easy, safe violence that only exists when the other side is unprotected, until now, as rocks began flying at the lead cars, bottles shattered against windshields, white men surged forward gripping clubs and tire irons, confident in their numbers and police indifference, and then the caravan stopped, not suddenly or chaotically but precisely, every door opening at once as 100 men stepped out calm, controlled, purposeful, spreading along the road with practiced efficiency, forming a human corridor stretching half a mile to the concert grounds, looking less like a street fight and more like a military deployment, with Bumpy Johnson standing at the front, still, hands at his sides. Eyes scanning the mob with absolute certainty, the kind that comes from knowing every outcome before the first move, and in that moment the rocks stopped, the shouting faded, the bats hesitated, because they understood something had gone wrong, that they were no longer facing frightened concertgoers but an organized force ready to finish what it started, a realization even the police felt as they shifted uneasily, reading the body language of men who knew exactly where they were supposed to stand, until Bumpy turned to 5 white officers and spoke calmly and clearly that they were there to escort Paul Robeson and protect the people who came to see him, warning that anyone who tried to stop them would face consequences they wouldn't enjoy, giving the officers a choice to do their jobs or stand aside, making it clear the concert would happen either way, and after doing the math the officers backed down, muttering about keeping the peace, to which Bumpy replied they would, as long as peace was kept, warning that one more rock or threat would be answered in a way that explained why Harlem did not tolerate racism, stepping forward and ordering them aside, and as the officers moved the caravan rolled again, Johnson's men walking in formation as a living shield while Robeson and concertgoers passed safely through, the mob left silent and humiliated as Harlem delivered a lesson Peekskill would never forget. Discipline defeats hatred, preparation beats numbers, and 100. Organized men can neutralize thousands fueled by rage, proving why Bumpy Johnson was legendary, though this moment began 2 days earlier, Thursday night, September 1, 1949, at 7:30 p.m., when Bumpy was eating dinner with his wife on Edgecombe Avenue and nearly ignored a ringing phone, only to hear attorney Theodore Green urgently ask for help bigger than business, about protecting the community and one of its most important voices from racist violence, asking for a meeting that night. And within 30 minutes Bumpy walked into Green's 125th Street office, about to make a decision that would place him and 100 Harlem men directly in the path of history. Green leaned forward as he explained that Paul Robeson was not just another performer but one of the most famous black Americans in the world, an internationally celebrated singer whose voice filled concert halls across Europe, a film and stage actor whose name carried prestige even inside white-controlled institutions, an intellectual and an activist who spoke openly, dangerously openly, about racism, colonialism, labor exploitation, and American hypocrisy at a time when doing so could end careers or lives, and that on September 4 Robeson was scheduled to perform an outdoor concert in Peekskill, New York as a benefit for the Civil Rights Congress, which was exactly why white supremacist groups were determined to stop it. As local residents had organized mobs, flyers had circulated, rumors had hardened into plans, and the Ku Klux Klan and allied racist organizations fully intended to prevent the concert by any means necessary, making violence not a possibility but the plan itself, and when Johnson calmly asked about the police, Green exhaled and admitted their position was already clear, that local law enforcement would not provide real protection and many officers openly sympathized with the mob, meaning any violence would be ignored or quietly encouraged, reminding Johnson that the first concert, scheduled for August 27, had never even begun because white supremacists attacked people as they arrived with rocks from hillsides, clubs in parking areas, smashed cars, burning crosses, and slurs screamed at families with children, beating people so badly the concert was cancelled and Robeson never reached the venue. And now with the rescheduled date of September 4, civil rights groups promised better security, but Green had seen the plans and knew 50 or 60 brave volunteers meant nothing against thousands of armed racists protected by police, lowering his voice to say plainly that these men were coming prepared to seriously injure, or kill, Paul Robeson, leading Johnson to quietly summarize that Green wanted him to provide the kind of security no one else could, enough men and resolve to make racists understand that attacking Robeson would have consequences, which Green confirmed before carefully adding that Robeson had risked everything to speak for their people and that if the mob succeeded it would prove any black man who spoke too loudly could be beaten into silence, something they could not allow, telling Johnson he was the only person capable of organizing protection that would actually work. As Johnson sat in silence, not weighing morality but logistics, routes, timelines, numbers, police reactions, crowd psychology, before finally agreeing to do it, stopping Green from thanking him by making it clear it was not for money or business but because Robeson represented something that mattered and because failing to protect him would mean admitting they couldn't protect their own, promising to bring 100 men to Peekskill to secure Robeson from arrival to departure and make clear that any attack would be answered. And over the next 2 days Johnson moved with relentless focus, mobilizing not casually but with discipline. Calling in decades of favors, contacting trusted enforcers, respected independents, union men, longshoremen, construction workers, veterans, Harlem men who understood danger and discipline, until by the evening of September 3 he had commitments from 103 men, organizing them into 5-man units with leaders, no freelancing or heroics, and that night in a Harlem warehouse he addressed them, explaining why they were going, laying out the plan of 23 cars in tight formation arriving at 1:45 p.m., no breaking ranks or responding to insults, moving and standing together, and ending any violence quickly and decisively if it came, making clear this wasn't about starting trouble but ensuring trouble understood it had picked the wrong day, a message that settled into silence as every man understood the risk, and not one backed out. Johnson's voice was steady and final as he explained they were creating a protected corridor from the road all the way to the concert grounds, maintaining it before, during, and after the concert so families, elderly people, children, anyone who came to hear music instead of hate, could move safely, making it clear they were not there to start violence but that if white supremacists attacked or touched anyone inside that corridor the response would be immediate and decisive, not with bravado but with calm certainty, showing something the mob didn't expect, that Harlem protected its own, that it was organized, disciplined, and willing to fight if necessary, and the men listened in absolute silence, many later saying Johnson's words were why none of them hesitated, as he reminded them that Paul Robeson didn't know most of them and wasn't paying for protection but was still one of them, a black man who reached greatness despite racism, who used his voice when silence would have been safer, who represented what their people could become. Which was why they were going to Peekskill, to prove them wrong, to prove Harlem protected its heroes, that organized black men could stand against racist mobs, and that violence against their people came with consequences, not for money or reputation but because it was right, and so at 11 a.m. on Sunday, September 4, 1949, the caravan assembled in Harlem, 23 cars, 100 men in dark, clean, pressed suits that made them look like a deliberate force, while Bumpy Johnson walked the line, checking faces, making eye contact, confirming assignments with quiet authority, and at 11:30 a.m. they rolled north toward Peekskill, a nearly 2-hour drive filled with reports of thousands of white supremacists gathering, black concertgoers being attacked, police watching, Klan members visible, weapons everywhere, hatred thick in the air, but Johnson understood the math, knowing they might be outnumbered 10-1 yet believing organization beat numbers and discipline beat rage. And at 1:30 p.m. as Peekskill came into view he radioed every unit to stay calm and disciplined, ignore insults, but respond with overwhelming force to any attack, because the mission was clear: protect Robeson and the concertgoers no matter what. And at 1:47 p.m. the caravan entered the main road into chaos, broken glass, screaming mobs, useless sirens, until the cars stopped and 100 men stepped out in unison, forming two precise parallel lines that created a 10-foot wide corridor. Nearly half a mile long to the concert grounds, 50 men on each side, eyes scanning, bodies angled forward, hands ready, turning easy violence into hesitation as white supremacists who had attacked isolated people now felt watched and measured. And when groups approached with bats and slurs testing the line, Johnson's men didn't flinch, tightened formation, made no threats, until Johnson calmly told them they could walk away or attack and find out what happened when they faced organized black men prepared to respond, and each time the challengers hesitated and retreated, test after test failing, discipline winning every time. So that by 2:15 p.m. Paul Robeson arrived and his car moved slowly through the corridor flanked by Johnson's men and union and civil rights volunteers, Robeson immediately understanding he was seeing an army neutralizing thousands without throwing a punch, walking to Johnson, two men from different worlds with the same purpose, thanking him for protecting everyone there, and Johnson shaking his hand firmly, telling Robeson he had fought for their people for years with his voice and that now it was their turn. Gesturing to the stage and telling him to go perform his concert, which Paul Robeson did. The concert began at 3 p.m., and what organizers had expected to be a modest gathering exploded into a sea of humanity as nearly 20,000 men, women, and children filled the grounds, drawn not only by Paul Robeson's voice but by defiance itself, because the violence of August 27th, bloodied concertgoers, smashed cars, burning crosses, and police standing idle, had been widely reported, turning attendance on September 4th into a statement against racism, and throughout it all Bumpy Johnson's men held formation for 3 straight hours under the hot September sun with no shade or relief, eyes constantly scanning as a humiliated but furious white supremacist mob lingered nearby, no longer attacking freely because they had learned the corridor would hold, though midway through the concert about 30 white supremacists rushed the line shouting with weapons raised, only to be intercepted instantly by a 5-man unit that broke formation with precision, ending the hand-to-hand fight in minutes and forcing the attackers to retreat injured and shaken, prompting police, for the first time all day, to push the mob back, not to arrest them but because continued inaction now risked exposure, and the concert continued as Robeson sang spirituals, folk songs, and anthems of dignity while speaking between songs about civil rights and human worth, making it painfully clear why racists wanted him silenced, because his voice inspired and reduced hatred to something small, and when the concert ended at 6 p.m. Johnson's men tightened formation again, reopening the corridor so families could leave safely while the mob watched impotently, and at 6:30 p.m. Robeson was escorted back through the corridor with Johnson personally walking beside his car, Robeson thanking him for showing that organized black men could stand against racist violence and that history would remember it, to which Johnson replied simply that they came because it was right, remaining in position another hour until every concertgoer had departed safely, standing down at 7:45 p.m. after 6 hours of discipline, confrontation, and tension without collapse, returning to Harlem by 10 p.m. where crowds filled the streets cheering not because violence had occurred but because it had been stopped, and though newspapers would call it the Peekskill riots and focus on racism and police complicity, Harlem remembered the corridor, the 100 men, and organized discipline defeating hatred, an operation that became legendary, praised quietly by Robeson and summed up best by Theodore Green when he said Bumpy Johnson was both criminal and protector, because when the law refused to protect Paul Robeson, Bumpy did, making September 4, 1949 not just about a concert but about a principle, that when institutions fail, communities protect their own, that discipline defeats hatred. And that sometimes standing against racism requires presence, organization, and courage, cementing Johnson's legacy not only as Harlem's power broker, but as its protector, the man who went to war and won without firing a shot, the day Harlem saved Paul Robeson and proved organized community power could stand against hatred and win.